I looked at death completely different after the incident with my son. And, I was a CNA for 11 years. I took care of people and I did a lot of hospice. And so it made me look at what they were about to go through completely different. And, when I worked in a nursing home, we would have a lot of family members that would bring their loved ones in there and just leave them there. Yeah. And they would end up dying alone. And I couldn't imagine that. Like, no one should have to go through that, So I would go into their rooms and I would close the door and I would sing to them.
Where we celebrate those who have overcome great adversity in their lives, and we examine the tools and techniques by which people create lives that feel like thriving. I'm your host, Dr. Jerry Sunshine Novak, and with me today is a really fascinating situation, fascinating guest today, because if you go to episode 14 of this podcast, I interviewed a friend of mine named Ruben Gonzalez, and we had a really heartfelt and touching conversation, largely around the loss of his daughter. And I got a lot of really good feedback about that episode. A lot of people enjoyed listening to that. And so today I am talking to Rebecca Gonzalez, who is married to Ruben, who she herself has overcome a great deal of adversity in her life. And the two of them together, after overcoming great hardship, have created a new sort of like fruitful and fulfilling life together, which I find to be a really fascinating story. And Rebecca has graciously agreed to share it with us. And aside from that, she's a parent and she's a member of our online communities on the Facebook pages. So welcome, Rebecca. Thank you so much for coming on and agreeing to talk to us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I'm thrilled to have it. And what I was hoping you might do is, it's interesting that you and Ruben both have quite a history of struggle and adversity, right, and that you and Ruben are spouses, you're married, but a lot of your struggle and adversity was not as a married couple. You guys came together later.
Right.
So I was hoping you might kind of jump in and talk to us about anything you want to share about who you are, where you come from, and we'll just sort of play it by ear from there.
Well, I'm from St. George, Utah, and there's 11 siblings or so in my family. I come from a large family. Only 4 of those 3 of them are full-blooded, but when I was little, parents divorced, and my mom, she met somebody and he wasn't the greatest person, and ended up leaving us with my dad. And she went to Reno and got married and all that kind of stuff, and we stayed in St. George. And it was a really, really hard time for me, because I was 7 years old when this happened, and we lived in a trailer park out in a little town called Ivins. And that's kind of where everything started to go wrong, because there was an older man who was, he kind of invited all of the kids to his house, and he would give them candy, and he would, do all of this stuff. And this is what we now call grooming. And I didn't know that back then. And so he, molested almost all of the little girls in our neighborhood, including me and some of my sisters. And I didn't think anything was wrong with it, because, my father was doing the same thing. So it was it's like, okay, when you're, that young, you think it's okay. This is normal. This is what happens and stuff. And then I remember one day just looking out the window and seeing a whole bunch of cop cars at this man's house. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? And, I find myself in a room with somebody and they're asking me questions and, that's kind of when I figured out, something is just not right. It was really, really wrong. And so it just kind of took off from there. My father didn't stop. And in fact, he would abuse me and my older brother a lot, and especially my older brother. But the beatings and stuff were, anything he could get a hold of, he would hit us with. And to this day, I have a fear of mouse traps. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is because if we did not clean the house or do something, he would get these mouse traps and threaten to put our hands and our feet in these mouse traps. And it's one of those the older ones where you flip the metal thing back, and if it just snaps. And so I still have that fear of those. And so, kind of going forward, he just wasn't a very good person. And when my stepmother came into my life, she was a mail order bride. He picked her out of a catalog from the Philippines. And I remember seeing her and in this catalog. And so when he went to the Philippines and he came back, she wasn't with him. And so I was really upset because I was so excited to meet her. And, and then he left and ended up she came back with him. And I had, shortly after that, I had a sister and then, two brothers and stuff like that. And so things were, a little bit okay, but he still had this anger problem. And then he started abusing my mom. I call her my mom. She's still my mom, but I love her to death. And so that's kind of where the whole abuse started in my life, was from him. When I was 16, or not 16, when I was 14 years old, we were on our way to Oregon, and we're in a motorhome, and it broke down on the side of the road. And there was a day where he was trying to force me on him, and I said no. I did not want to get off me, whatnot. And he just kept doing it. And I ran into a gas station and called my Uncle Johnny that lived in Las Vegas, and he came and got me. And that's kind of where everything just turned upside down for me, because I was bounced from family to family. And I wanted my mother, is where I wanted to go, was to be with my mom. And I missed her so much. And so I went to California, and I stayed with my aunt and uncle, and I kind of helped take care of my uncle. He was a quadriplegic. And, it was hard for me growing up in a strict LDS home. My family is LDS. Yeah. And there was a lot of things that I was not used to. And there was, I'm not a racist person, and there were certain people that I was not allowed to hang out with, because of color and whatnot. And it's just, I learned a lot from them, and being in California and whatnot. And that's kind of where my caretaking kind of came in. And
was that in Loma Linda in California? Is that where you were?
I was in Tustin, California.
Okay, because Loma Linda is a big LDS kind of.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was in Tustin, California. Mm-hmm. So when things didn't go quite well there, I was then sent to Las Vegas to live with my cousin Missy. And it was hard at first, and but then I went to school, I made friends, I got a job, but a part of me still wanted to be with my mother.
Sure.
And so we went to St. George to visit family. And I remember that I got into a fight with my Aunt Alex, who was the mother of my cousin Missy. And she left me in St. George. She didn't take me back to Las Vegas. And then one day she shows up at my stepmother's house where I was at, and she drives me to Gunnison, Utah, where my mother was. And she drops me off there. So I was like, I was happy because I was with my mom, but things just kind of started going downhill from there. Thank you. I told my mom that I was going to do this, and I told her that it wasn't going to really be about her, just about certain things and just the way things went down and where I ended up because of, of certain things that happened in my life. But my mom was addicted to meth. Mm-hmm. And I remember that, one day that we got into a fight, and she had slapped me in the face, and she kicked me out. And so I went and lived with my really good friend, Bo, and his mom. And I was still going to school. I was doing really well. And, didn't have any bad grades, nothing. But there was one day that she came in, she says, I want you to come home. And I said, no, I don't want to go home. And she then called the police on me because I didn't want to go home. And the officer basically told me that if I did not go home, that I was going to go into a youth facility. Mm-hmm. And so I basically said that I wasn't going to go home. And my mom looks at the officer and says, you can have her. And I was then taken to Richfield and was put into a youth center. And a couple of days later, I had a wonderful lady. Her name is Tara Franson. She came and interviewed me. It was kind of like a little interview, and asked me if I wanted to come and live with her. And I said yes. So I went to a little town called Monroe in Utah, and she was my foster mom. And I then met my foster dad, and they adopted 2 children of their own, and they were such a great family. And they're on my Facebook. I still talk to them every once in a while, and it was a little hard getting used to being there. And again, they were an LDS family. So I was trying to go back to church with them. I was trying to, I was singing in the choir and all that kind of stuff. And it turned out to be a lot better than I had expected it to be. But when I turned 18, I decided to go back to my mom. And I was the first one in my family to graduate high school. I still, did that. And that was a huge accomplishment for me. I then went to St. George, and, I got a job as a CNA, went to school, got that. And then I got pregnant with my son. I was 18 years old and was pregnant. And I did not know what was in store for me, because my mom struggled, and I knew that I was going to struggle as well. So I went back to Gunnison, and I ended up giving birth to my son, and it was hard. It was so hard. And I didn't have a job. I was, living off the state. I was getting WIC. Every little thing I could get. And there was a time that I ran out of formula, and I called my dad and I asked him, I says, could you please just send me some money? And he refused to, told me to go to the hospital and get food for my son. And I knew that I had to change something, because I could not live like this. Right. And, so I went back to St. George and started, working again and whatnot. And then I met someone, and I got pregnant with my second son. And then I, of course, moved back to Gunnison. And, but this time, I had my CNA and whatnot. And so I was working at the hospital there in Gunnison, and until my son came, Kason. And so I ended up moving to Provo, Utah, and lived with my cousin Joey and his wife. And, things were great. I was working. I got my own house, and things were just starting just to look really, really good. Single mom, 2 boys. And then, I was dating my ex-husband at the time, and Bladen had to have surgery on his mouth. And so, huh?
That's your oldest son?
My oldest son is Bladen. Yep,
Okay.
my oldest son is Bladen. He's the one that's in the Army right now. But
all right, yes.
very proud mother, right, of him. He's done really, really well for himself. But he had to have surgery on his mouth because when he was little, he had fallen and knocked a tooth back up into his gum, and that tooth had died. So they had to go and clean that tooth out and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And so, I was getting him ready for a surgery, and we went to Kmart and we got some slippers, and Bladen picked out these Scooby-Doo slippers, and Kaysen picked out these Cookie Monster slippers. And he was so excited about these Cookie Monster slippers that he wore them throughout the store. He flipped out when I took them off because we had to pay for them, but he wore them to bed, and he wore them that next day that I took him to the babysitter's house. And so I took Bladen and got his little surgery thing done, and came home, and of course I went and got Kaysen. And I was going to put him down for a nap, and I had gone to the fridge. He liked these drinkable yogurts, so I got a sippy cup and went and got a strawberry drinkable yogurt thing and put it in. And we were sitting at the fridge, and he was pointing to, I had a program of my great grandfather, Joe. It was his program from his funeral on my fridge, and Kaysen was pointing at it. And as many times as I've had him up to that fridge with me, he's never done that before. He never did that. And I was like, yeah, that's Grandpa Joe. And, so I went and put him in his playpen to go to sleep. And I went downstairs to do some laundry, and I come back up, and he got out of his playpen, and he was standing on top of a dresser. And I flipped out, like, oh my gosh, my child just got out. He's going to fall. He's, just panicking that something horrible is going to happen. So I put him back in his playpen, and I pushed the playpen back so he could not get out. I then went and laid on the couch, and I ended up falling asleep. I woke up to my ex-husband saying, Becca, Kaysen isn't breathing. I panicked. I grabbed him. And he wasn't. He was just limp, and and I was trying to stick my finger in his mouth to clear his airway to see if there was something he was choking on, and there was nothing. And I'm trying to do CPR and not panic at the same time. And I was trained to do this for so many years. CPR, I know how to do it. But when it's your child, it's like you panic, and everything that you've learned just kind of, you forget it. So I'm on the phone with 911, and I'm trying to, to bring him back, and a cop comes in, and I am like begging him, please save my son, please, and my son was 18 months old when this happened. And so they take me out of the house, but they leave Bladen in there, watching everything that they're doing to him. And I didn't know that he was still in there. They put me in the truck, and I see them carry Kaysen out and put him in the ambulance, and I am fighting these cops. Hitting them to try to get to my son, and they take off. So they put me in the cop car, and I go to the hospital, and they put me in a room, and I have somebody that comes in and is trying to talk to me, and I'm just not even paying attention. I'm not there. I'm just waiting to find out what is going on with my son. And the doctor comes in, and he said, we did everything that we could, but we couldn't save him. And so we're going to get him ready for you, and you can come back and you can hold him until it's time to go. And I couldn't believe the words that were being told to me, like, my son is dead. Are you kidding? Like, how do you process that? And so they're like, you know, he has a breathing tube coming out of his mouth. You can't touch it. You have to leave it there. Just don't remove anything that's on him. So they put me in a wheelchair and they give me some medication to calm me down because I'm freaking out. And they take me back to him, and he's in a blanket, and I just hold him for hours. I just sat there holding him, and my family from Gunnison drove up and was with me, and I was there, but I wasn't there. I wasn't. And you know, that whole situation was hard, but what was the hardest for me was when my mother made the decision that it was time for me to go. And I was not handing Kason over at all. So I get my mother on one side of me. I can't remember who it was on the other side of me, and they pry my hands away, and somebody comes and takes my child from me. And I think that was the hardest part for me, was letting go, and I couldn't. And so I was fighting them as well, and trying to get out of the wheelchair, and I was hitting people and, you know, and whatnot. And the police officer came in and said that they were going to, you know, have to put me in handcuffs if I didn't settle down because I was going berserk. So they ended up, you know, taking me home, and I went and got bladed, and it was just, you know, weird things just around the house started happening. And to me, it was like, I know he's there. Like the TV would turn off or something. And I'm not kidding. And you hear it all the time, and you really don't believe it until it happens to you. But a cup of water fell over, and the toilet, but it was just weird things. And so I knew that he was still there. I knew he was. And that yogurt that I was telling you about that I poured, I could smell it in my house. I smelled it everywhere I went, everywhere. And so I was trying to, you know, now that when I got home, all of his stuff was gone. All of his stuff, his blanket, his the stuff that was inside of his playpen, everything was gone because I was told they were treating it as a homicide. And until they could, you know, do further investigation, that's just kind of what they defaulted to. So when I had some lady from the hospital show up, and she brought me this box that it was in the shape of a heart, and I opened it, and I had forgotten that there was a lady that came in and took molds of his hand and his foot and me holding his hand. And this is what she brought to me as a gift, and the blanket that I held him in. And there was plaster on the blanket and whatnot. And so it was, you know, a great thing for me to have. And I got a call from the detective who said that, you know, they finished with the autopsy and everything, and that his biological father had called the police wanting an investigation done on me and my ex-husband, saying that he thinks that we killed him. And I was just horrified. You know,
Yeah.
this is, I'm having to go through the loss of my child, and now you're telling me that I'm being accused of this and whatnot. He said, well, I told him where to go and how to get there. And if you have any other, further problems with him, you let me know. But with our investigation, we know that it was not a homicide, and, it was just an accident. So what had happened with the case was he had gotten out again of his playpen, and he fell. Normally, like where I put the playpen, there's a closet door, and normally this closet door would cave in and he would have just, gone straight down. But I had a box of diapers behind this door. And so when he went down, he got stuck.
Mhm.
And the bar of the playpen caught him by the neck, and he died from asphyxiation from, the hanging. And it took a long time for me to process, what had happened, and that he was no longer there. And I remember, and I know that my sister would remember this, but I would have breakdowns all the time. And I had one of my sisters tell me that I needed to get over it,
Mhm.
because I still had Bladen and he needed me. That stuck with me for so long, and it still does to this day, because you can't tell somebody, especially a mother who just lost her child, to get over it.
Right.
And when you haven't been through it yourself, you don't know what this feels like. And the only other person who really lost a child in our family was my great grandmother.
Right.
So I went through this, dealing with it on my own. I didn't have any counseling. I didn't have anyone to, could call my mom, but she can't relate. And so when you don't relate to a situation, you don't know how that other person feels. And so I moved to Delta, and, when I moved out of that house that he died in, I went back in after everything was gone. I went back in just to kind of, do my little final goodbye. And I walked into the kitchen, and the light was flickering.
Mhm.
And I never had any problems with the lights in that house, but it was just flickering. And I stood there and just watched it. And to me, I felt like it's my son saying I'm okay, whatnot. And the moment my ex-husband stepped foot in that house, it stopped.
Mhm.
So I moved to Delta. Well, it's Deseret. It's a little town in Utah. And we had the funeral and on, and my son is currently buried in Hinckley, Utah. And it was like maybe 10 minutes from where I lived. So I was going to that cemetery every single day, every day. And just to check up on him and make sure that that he was okay and whatnot. And mind you, so when we had his funeral, I dressed him in a white suit, but I put those Cookie Monster slippers that he loves so much on him. So, like Ruben, he has a thing with Baby Yoda and Sophie.
Mhm.
That's, mine is Cookie Monster. That's, I collect everything that's Cookie Monster. And so that's my happy memory with my son. So, shortly after that, I got married, and I, ended up having 2 sets of twins.
Hmm.
And I, gave birth to my first set, where it was 2 boys and then a boy and a girl.
Hmm.
And, but the marriage was not good at all. I was put through abuse on that one as well. And I ended up leaving. And I think that's one of my greatest regrets is leaving the way that I did, because I felt that if I stayed, it wasn't fair to the kids to continue to see this abuse and, hear it and whatnot. And so in my mind, I thought it would be better for me to leave. And I regret that decision every single day. Because it's been over 10 years since I've seen my other 4 children. And it wasn't that I was a horrible mom. It was that I had an ex-husband who was very vindictive. And everyone thinks in the state of Utah, they're always for the mom. But, in this case, it was about who you knew and how much money you had. But, in the end, I ended up getting my oldest son, Bladen. And so, I ended up meeting somebody else, and we got married, and, really, really fast. And he served in the Army as well, had tremendous PTSD. And when he would get mad, he would just see red. And then the anger would come out, and you couldn't stop him at all. So when I was, being beaten by him as well, and Bladen would come in and try to, there was a time that Bladen came in with a sword. It was an actual real sword, defending me, telling him, get off my mom. And, I knew then, okay, we have to, we have to change this. I can't do this anymore. So I ended up leaving him, and, I was being a single mom, and it was hard. I got a really good job at a law firm and whatnot. And I was doing Uber and Lyft, and I was working all the time. And all I could focus on is I need to work and to bring in this money so I can give my son the life that I never had. But, now looking back on it, I missed all that time with my son. And now I question, was it worth it?
Right.
Because he isn't here anymore. And after Bladen left for the Army, we wrote letters back and forth, and there's a lot of heartfelt letters that I wrote to him, apologizing to him for not always being there, for always working, always, just doing something. But this kid was just, he had been through tremendous hardship as well because of the abuse from my first ex-husband, and him dealing with losing Kason and being in there and watching it. Bladen blamed himself for so long because he got into that playpen and tried to pull Kason out, pull him back, but he couldn't because Kason was so much heavier than him. And so he blamed himself a lot because of that. But, through all the hell that I had been through, it was like things were starting to look up. And I bought my first house in Utah, and, everything that I thought couldn't be possible, I made possible. And I had to change my way of thinking first, because my father put me through complete hell. He did, growing up. And then I realized one day that I'm not going to allow him to win anymore. Yeah. I'm not. I'm going to let what he did to me go. I'm not going to be that victim. I don't want to, give him that power, knowing that he hurt me in that way. And then
even if he doesn't know, even if he doesn't know, this is one of the things I see so often is like, people, and myself too, I had to fight through this in my own life. But when somebody mistreats you for a long time when you're young,
Yeah.
and then even when you're away from them, even when you move away or you're on your own, if you still continue to mistreat yourself, if you continue to not allow yourself anything, if you don't allow yourself to rest, you don't allow yourself to enjoy things, you don't allow yourself to have healthy relationships, whether the other person knows it or not, you're still giving them all that power, right? You're
Right.
still living in a way that's in reference to them. And so, and a lot of people will get out of a situation like that and try to do the opposite. Well, living in the opposite is still in reference to the person who mistreated you. It's still giving them power, right?
Right.
There's no, what's the word I'm looking for? Substitution for getting out of a situation like that and figuring out how to create from a clean slate, right? That's the only way that you take the power away from them, is to create
Right.
what you want, whether without it, without any concern at all, whether it looks like what you had with them or whether it's the opposite of what you had, it just doesn't matter. Right?
And it's true. I found myself in a lot of, just with dating and whatnot, that I would revert back to that behavior of being treated horribly, and the name calling and the, it's, it was really, really bad.
Yeah.
There was a time when I was at work, when I lived in Deseret, and I had it was just a horrible day, and I knew that one of my breakdowns was about to happen. And so I went to my boss and said, I need to leave. I drove to the cemetery and I went to my son's grave, and there was nobody there. And I went and I hugged my son's headstone, and I just screamed. I screamed as loud as I could, and I cried, and I said I was sorry. And just, when something that traumatic happens to you, you just, all of the what ifs, I could have, all, you blame yourself. And so everything that had been building up, I was just letting out. And after I was done, I felt a little better. I was like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. And, and it wasn't easy because, again, I didn't have anyone to really talk to that could relate. I had to figure out how to deal with this, how to go through life now without my son, how to, it's, a part of me died that day. A part of me got buried with him in that casket. A part of me, there was a time that my mother, she pointed at a picture of me and she says, I want to know where that girl is. Where is my daughter in that picture? I says, you want to know where she is? I says, she's in that ground with her boy. That's where she is. She's dead because she died the day that her son died. That's where she is. And it changes you. Everything about you, everything about your life, it's just, I was so paranoid then because my worst fear came true of losing a child. And now I'm just terrified that something else is going to happen to, my other son. And so I would constantly go and make sure that he was still breathing. Or when my son wanted to, when he felt like he was old enough to go to school by himself, he's a big boy now and he wants to, get on his bike and ride to school, and it wasn't that far. And I still had that hard time of letting go. And so I'm like, okay, you can go. Little did he know, I was right behind him in my car, going as slow as I could, and followed him to the school to make sure that he was okay. or just when Bladen wouldn't answer the phone, I would drive home to make sure that he was okay, and he was just sleeping. And everything about you changes. It really, really does. But through all the hell that I've been through, and with Case and whatnot, I came to realize that things happen for a reason. Yeah. Even though we may not know what that reasoning is, one day we will. And I'm not going to go through life as a victim and I need to be dependent on pills to get me through the day and whatnot. I'm going to take what happened to me and turn it into something positive. Losing my son, losing Kason was by far the hardest thing that I've ever had to go through. It was complete. I mean, losing a child is what I call hell on earth. It truly is. But I decided that I was going to take that and turn it into something positive and help other people that have maybe lost a child and know that, it's going to be okay. You never get over it. You just learn to live with it. You learn different things and it becomes a new life for you. And, so that's kind of what I did with Ruben when we moved here. And I really didn't know the full extent of Sophie and her diagnosis. And I've never been around a child that had cancer. And, I thought, what happened, she was going to be okay. And so when, she was at home on hospice and whatnot, he told me, he said, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I'll be able to get through this. And, I'll really need you. And I said, it's okay, because I'm strong enough to hold both of us up. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened. Yeah. So it's, the day that Sophie passed away, it was flashbacks of when I lost Kason. Was just popping in my mind, and I never thought that I would have to relive something like that again. But I did, and we, every day's it's a struggle. I still have my own struggles, and I don't break down as much as I do, as I used to, but I still do on occasions. But I still celebrate his birthday every year. It's like with Sophie, everything that I do as a tradition for me and Bladen, I now do with Ruben and with Sophie. And, when Christmas comes, Bladen used to always get, he still does get, say, a gift from Kason. And so this past year, I didn't know how that was going to be perceived with the other kids, but I decided that, with talking to Ruben, let's do that. Let's see how this goes. And if it doesn't go well, we just won't do it anymore. But I got a gift for each one of them from Sophie and gave it to them and told them, before I gave it to them, that this is what I have done since Kason's been gone, and wanted to know if they would like to do that as well. And, it was perceived with the greatest response. And so it's kind of, a tradition now that what we're going to continue to do. But it's, through all of the abuse and losing my son, and I'm surprised that I am where I am today. I really am. I'm shocked that I am, because, when I was in St. George, I had a tumor, and I woke up in the ICU and I was unconscious for like 3 days. And there was a doctor there who was trying to convince me that I tried to commit suicide. And I knew that that wouldn't happen. It didn't make sense to me. I have a son. I wouldn't try to kill myself because I just, whatever. So he wanted me to go see somebody, and I went and saw somebody, and he wanted to know my story. And so I just completely let everything out. And he looks at me, he said, I'm really shocked that you haven't tried to kill yourself yet. I'm really shocked. But, you know, I couldn't do that. Not just for me, but for my son. I couldn't leave him like that. And that little boy, you know, he's not such a little boy now, but he saved me on so many levels. He did, because when I felt like giving up, when I felt like I couldn't do it, and, you know, he was right there to remind me that I could. So he helped me a lot more than he knew, and that he knows today, you know.
Right.
And so for so many years, it was just him and I. And I tell you what, when he left for the Army, oh my gosh, it was like I was in mourning again, all over again. But he's still alive. He's still here. He's, you know, but it's just being separated. It was, oh my gosh.
Well, I think you have now a different framework for like absence, right?
Yeah.
Than most people do.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, so with when we moved here, I decided to, you know, maybe I should go and see a therapist and see, you know. And so they said I do have PTSD with all of the stuff that's happened to me. I do. And it's not shocking,
right,
that I was told that, but it explains a lot of why I am the way I am, or react a certain way, or, you know, I'm still paranoid with Bladen, with him being gone, and, you know, not knowing if he's still okay, if he's, you know, when somebody does something, you know, I'm that mother bear that wants to go and attack the person, that, how dare you talk to my son like that? How dare you hurt him? How, you know, and
hopefully
he's
he
trying.
didn't tell you much about boot camp then.
No, he did. But the thing is that he wouldn't tell me on the phone. He would tell me in the letters, because then he knew that, you know, that I'd be like, oh no, I'm calling somebody and I am going to, you know, rip their head off. But he's trying to get me to let go a little more. And now the words of, I know, Mom, I'm an adult. I can make my own decisions. I know. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, it's here.
The one of the hardest things, you know, I find myself, I have this conversation a lot with folks, and, you know, one of the areas, so I don't do therapy anymore, but I do coaching now, but I still work with parents, right? I sort of always parenting. When I got my PhD, I wrote my dissertation on parenting, on fatherhood. And so one of the things that's really challenging and really difficult is, you know, our job as parents really is to give our kids what they need, right? And sometimes what they need is security and safety and comfort. And sometimes what they need is discipline, you know, and a boot up their ass, so to speak, right? But there comes a time, like for a big chunk of their life, what they need is safety, you know? And that looks a lot of different ways, right? Sometimes it looks like warmth and compassion and letting them know that mom's got them. Sometimes it looks like, you know, discipline and putting your foot down, because now there's safety in the fact that you're running the show, right? But eventually you get to a point where what they need is freedom.
Right.
And after you've been providing safety for almost 2 decades, starting to pull that back and allow them to have freedom. And I think one of the most difficult things as parents is that our job, like this is why it's so important for parents to support each other and connect with each other and sort of be teammates, not just within a family, but just in general, right? Is because our job is really like, it may be killing us, like crushing us, to pull back and give them freedom. And part of our job is to manage that privately because it's not theirs, it's ours.
Right.
Right. And so I think, having a support network of people who have kids and sort of understand this is really important because, if we want our kids to have it better than we did, if we want them to be resilient and healthy and strong, and, we have to sort of provide what they need at these different developmental phases throughout their life. And eventually they get to a phase where they what they need, they still probably, he's 18, Bladen.
No, he's 19.
19 still, right? Until he's
Still.
probably in his late 20s or something. He'll still need to know that, like, if his life turns to shit, he can come home, right? And like,
Oh yeah, he knows that.
right.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
right, but he needs to be like encouraged out to,
I know.
and that's
I know.
so hard. So
It is because our job is to prepare our children for adulthood. It's teach them.
And then push them into it, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But nobody teaches the adults of what's going to happen, like their emotions of what they're going to go through when their child, leaves. And some parents are so excited and they celebrate and they, and it was just the complete opposite for me. And but I'm slowly,
most people have some combination,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm getting better. And Ruben's helped me with it a lot. And it's for so many years, it was me making all the decisions, not having to answer to anybody, having to, and now that I'm married, it's hard. Marriage it's hard. It's so hard. It's not easy, but I wouldn't want to spend any, my life without him.
Yeah.
And we help each other in different ways. And I'm the one in the relationship that stresses over everything I do. I overthink things, and and he tries to bring me down to where, look, it's not that big of a deal. Let's just calm down, step back, take a breath, rethink it, and
sounds like Ruben.
Yeah, it sounds like Ruben. But he's such a great man, and with everything that we've gone through in the last couple of years that we've been with each other, it's one of the best, healthiest relationships I've ever been in. And I get along with his mother. The mother-in-law, I love her. I do. I call her my mom, and she's absolutely amazing. And, he has a great family support, and they've accepted me. And I went and met them for the first time, like all of them, for Thanksgiving. And it was absolutely amazing. They're amazing people. But just this life that I have now, I never thought in a million years I would ever have. Yeah. The way that we met, it was, on Facebook, of all things, where most people nowadays meet. But coming to your house and seeing him every day, and getting to know you and whatnot, and meeting your boys, and it's a whole different life than I ever dreamed that I would ever have. And now I'm an Army wife and Army mom, and I really didn't know anything about the Army, and now I have an Army family. Yeah. And I'm thankful for where I'm at. I worked my ass off to get here. Yes. And went through complete hell, but we're here. And, we bought our first home together, and things are just, they're great. They really are. And so with everything that you go through in life, there is a positive outcome if you choose
Right.
that you want that outcome. There is a positive one, and you can have the best life ever,
Right.
regardless of what you've been through. And it's not that you forget what you've been through. It just makes you stronger. And it's made me a completely stronger person. It's changed me, but I'm so much stronger because of it.
Well, and I heard several things that you said that, so first of all, let me say that, of course, especially in social sciences, which are a little less exact than like what they call the hard sciences, right? People don't exist in a petri dish. So we can't study them under a microscope.
Right.
But so it's pretty common. It's not unusual for, different therapists to have different opinions about the same kind of thing, right? It's really hard to predict. And when it comes to things like violence, whether it's violence toward other people or violence toward ourselves, like suicide, we're terrible predictors of violence. We're not, we do worse than chance, right? Even with all our fancy assessment tools and everything, psychologists are not good predictors of violence. Nobody is. And so, but I have a different reaction from the therapist you saw, because I'm not surprised that you didn't kill yourself, because it has less to do with what you've been through and more to do with who you are. I know people do, and I'm not trying to make light of it. It's a serious issue and a serious problem, and some people do. They get so overwhelmed by life's, and some people have more struggles than others, and it's not about judging it at all. It's just you've done things along the way somehow, somehow intuitively or through sheer grit or something. You made meaning out of adversity, right? You made meaning out of loss. You made meaning out of abuse. You made meaning out of you practice gratitude. You find, even in the worst shitstorms, you find reasons to be grateful. And to be clear for what that means for most people, like, that's not a silver lining, right? That's not sunshine and rainbows. It's not pretending that the real shit you're dealing with isn't there. It's just recognizing that the awful things are there, and also the reasons to have gratitude. They both exist.
Right.
And so it's not about one canceling out the other. It's just about having a balanced picture. No matter how shitty things get, there are reasons to be grateful. There were times where you talked about having self-compassion, right? Just you brutal on yourself for a while, and then you just gotta give yourself a break and treat yourself like a human being. And so
I looked at death completely different after the incident with my son. And I was a CNA for 11 years. I took care of people, and I did a lot of hospice. And so it made me look at what they were about to go through completely different. And when I worked in a nursing home, we would have a lot of family members that would bring their loved ones in there and just leave them there. And they would end up dying alone. And I couldn't imagine that. Like, no one should have to go through that, So I would go into their rooms and I would close the door and I would sing to them. And I knew that they weren't awake, and they couldn't talk to you, but they could hear me, and I knew that they could hear me. So I just wanted them to know that somebody did care. and somebody was there. And so it, like I said, it changes every aspect of you, and you have more compassion for other people. And so when I hear about stuff on the news and what these children have to go through, it just infuriates me, because I didn't have that choice with my son, and these people have choices, and it really just ticks me off. It really, really does.
I had a similar reaction. So, I mean, I had an experience of profound loss too when I was little. When I was 7, my mother died. And like, I remember being a teenager and hearing kids just be awful to their mothers.
Right.
And like, man, you don't know how lucky you are. Like, and then
Right.
there's a part of, I didn't get it back then, but now, right? Back then I was just disgusted. I was like, I don't know how you can talk to your mother that way. Like, you have no idea. Like, let her die tonight and you will beg for an opportunity to apologize, right? Now, as an adult, right, as somebody who's almost 50, I look back and I have sort of both reactions. When I hear kids mouthing off to their moms on the one hand, part of the reaction is like, you have no idea like how lucky you are. And then there's another part of me that's like, I'm kind of glad you have no idea.
Right.
Right. Like it hurts me to hear you take this person for granted because they could disappear like that. But I'm also glad that you don't have that terrible knowledge.
Thankfully, my mother's still here. And I mean, we haven't had the best relationship. I mean, it's still, I have a lot of hurt that I just can't seem to let go with my mother. But I love her more than anything. And if she needed something, I'm right there, all the time with, any legal stuff, just because, I work for a law firm. So anything that's legal, she comes to me with and I help her. But the thought of losing her, I can't even imagine it. But my father, on the other hand, he accused me of killing my son. And he made a comment to me, at least this one got away from you. And it was after a conversation that so he got another mail order bride. He likes these, these Filipino women. And she had contacted me asking me, why none of us kids have anything to do with him. So I proceeded to tell her. He found out. And so he lashed out at me. And, after he said what he said, I said, you are going to die a very lonely man. When you die, there's not going to be anyone around you. None of your kids will be there. I mean, it's what you deserve because of what you've done.
Right.
And so then I get a phone call, and he says, Rebecca. I said, what? He said, this is your father. Okay, what? He said, I think I'm having a heart attack. And I said, well, what the hell do you want me to do with it? And mind you, the state of Utah, Utah is such a great state, right? They gave him a plea deal. Leave the state of Utah and not come back, and you won't go to prison. So he left, went to South Carolina, and worked for a girls' home. And it was just a horrible, horrible thing. But he says, I think I'm having a heart attack. I said, what do you want me to do? Go to the hospital. I'm in Utah. I can't do nothing for you. So, a couple days later, I get a phone call, and I have an older half sister that is, the spitting image of him, and we don't have a relationship at all. But she told me that he died, and that he had died on the side of the road in his truck. And I didn't have any emotion, none, because to me, he was someone that I used to know. And she had, cremated him, whatnot, and his, she sent some of his ashes home. And I personally, and this may sound like a shitty thing to do, I wanted to flush him down the toilet. I did, because to me, that's where he belonged, was down the toilet. And I have no feeling towards that man at all whatsoever, except that he's probably where he should be. And he died exactly the way I told him he was going to die.
Yeah.
And I don't feel bad because of all of the hell that he put us through. I mean, this man made my brother live out in a shed with no electricity, nothing, just a bed. And, when he didn't do something right, he wouldn't let him come in the house and eat. And he would stand outside looking through the window at us. And it completely broke my heart looking at my brother like this. And I mean, he was just not a good man at all whatsoever. And so I have no feelings towards him. I don't. And I, it's probably normal for that to happen. But, my mother, I love that woman and would do anything for her. And I know that day is going to come, but hopefully it doesn't come anytime soon, because
Well, yeah, you and I have had the opposite
right.
reactions, because I lost a mother early on in my life, and I spent my adulthood terrified with my children, because like it's terrible knowledge to know how badly that can hurt. And yet, like, the craziest experience is after you suffer like that, sun just comes up the next day and people open their businesses and like everything just keeps going, right? Like
right. And I don't ever think of him unless he comes up in a conversation or something just pops in my, but I don't, and I don't care to. And he doesn't deserve that from me at all.
Yeah.
But I am thankful that I do have one parent here, and that she just I helped her with all this legal stuff. She just adopted my 2 nephews and my niece. And yesterday, as a matter of fact, and she had called me when I was at work, like video timed me on Facebook, and she's like, I just want you to know. And I was looking at her and I could see her tear up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm at work, here we go, we're gonna start crying. And I'm like, oh please. And so I go out in the waiting room and I'm just sitting there, and she's thanked me before for doing stuff for her, but the way that she did it this time was completely different than any other time. And I really felt appreciated by my mother. And that's something that, I've wanted from her for so long, but just appreciate that I'm your daughter, that I'm here, that I'll help you, that I'll, I just, no matter what. And we went through a time where we didn't talk for months and months and months. And I was so mad at her because she didn't call on Casey's birthday. She didn't call on the day that he passed. She didn't, and everything she was missing. And so I had more anger towards her. And, and we didn't talk up until when Bladen left, because Bladen then said, my mom is going to need you. So you might want to just call her and talk to her. And, my sister Anna called me and just to see how I was doing. And of course I was an emotional mess and I was just breaking down. And then she said, Mom wants to talk to you. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So the moment she got on the phone and I hadn't talked to her, seen her in months, I broke down because it made me realize how much I really miss my mother, you know. So it's still a work in progress. No relationship is perfect, regardless of, you know, whether it's marriage or a relationship between you and your parent or siblings and whatnot. You know, I don't have the greatest relationship with my siblings, except one sister that I talk to all the time. Her name's Kathleen, and I, you know, but it's a lot harder too that I'm here in Wisconsin and they're in Utah. And I'm missing all of these family get-togethers, all the family functions, all the, you know, school plays, everything that I would attend to, the birthday parties, and I only get to see it on live on Facebook. And to me, it's heartbreaking. But I still wouldn't trade my life for it because I love where I'm at.
Everything comes at a cost, right?
Everything does. Everything does.
Comes at a cost. And
but
so, you know,
I tell you, I have the most wonderful husband. As you all know, I really, really do. And I'm so thankful for him because as much as I have helped him, he has helped me.
Yeah.
He really has. And he helps me every day, even if he doesn't know it. And I appreciate that man. I mean, this man cooks me dinner almost every night and just says, go, you know, go really, because I work my ass out at that gym. I'm telling you, I run all the time and I'm walking crippled today because I'm so sore. And no matter what it is, he's always there. And I know that regardless of who is in my life, he is the one person that I can always turn to, the one person I can always count on, depend on, just, you know, for any kind of support, he's there.
Yeah.
And
build a house on him.
The what?
I said you could build a house on him.
Absolutely.
A solid foundation. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've never met anyone quite like him. Yeah. So I'm glad I held on to him when I did. Yes. And you know, so everything's turned out the way it's supposed to. Yeah. I feel.
Still turning out, right? Still going. It's not done yet.
Oh no, we'll be here for at least 4 more years, and then
in Minnesota, yeah.
And well, in Wisconsin.
Wisconsin,
yeah. And then we're going to move to Arkansas to be closer to his family. And you know, we were going to move to Utah, but then when I went to Arkansas, I was like, okay, we can do this. We can do this here. Like home. It did. It really, really did. And but we'll see how things turn out. But for now, it's one day at a time. And
all it can be, right? It's all you all the universe gives you is a day at a time.
I know. So yep.
Well, you know, I want to stay aware of our time and be respectful of your time, but I will say you said something a ways back that hit me as like it was this, you know, one little statement you made, but it made me think like it was evidence of a turning point. And it was when you were talking about Bladen going to the Army, and you said you were talking about raising him and being a single mom, and all you did was work, and you drive Uber and you drive Lyft, and all you did was work, so that you could try to provide for him.
Right.
And you said now you look back and you wonder if it was really worth it because you missed so much. And that to me sounded like a turning point, because when you're in survival mode and you're just like every day you're just fighting with all you got to just hold shit together, you don't get to wonder stuff like that. Right. The ability to wonder whether you're making the right choice or not is actually a privilege, and it only comes when things have chilled out a little bit. Right. When you're, you know, when the gazelle, like when the lion pounces and the gazelle has to run, he doesn't get to wonder whether he ran in the right direction or the wrong direction.
Right.
He just fucking runs.
Right.
And
right.
so if you're wondering, like, I wonder if that was the right thing to do. In fact, in Judaism, there's a saying that says, if you're wondering which one's the right path to be on, you're on it.
Right. Right.
And so to me, like, it may not have sounded like much to you, but I heard that statement and it sounded like things must be better if you're able to wonder,
he, after I wrote that letter, he wrote me back, and he told me that he could not have made it without me, that he would not be where he is at without me because of what I did for him. And, when we bought our first house, it wasn't the most fancy house, but it was ours. It was our home. And, I would go pick him up at his friend's house, and it was this big fancy house. And I would tell him, I'm sorry that I can't give this to you, or I'm sorry that you don't have a dad, or I'm sorry. And he says, you know what, Mom? He says, I love our life. I love what you were able to provide for us. And it's okay if I don't have a dad, I have a mom. And, that's badass, because I was to he was in JROTC. I was to every event. I was there, every single one. And I was cheering him on. I was going to, I was a booster mom, and car washes, everything. And, so in these letters, we were talking about it, and it really hit me that, when he told me how much he appreciated me, and that he admitted to, there were certain times in his life that he took advantage of me. And Ruben, made the comment about it. And I was just like, no, not my son. My son wouldn't do that. And, and when he finally admitted that to me, I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen, but this whole experience with him being gone is just, it's a learning point for me, being without him now. And it still is, but it makes us appreciate our relationship more, that he still knows that even though he's currently in Fort Benning, still stuck there waiting to go to Fort Hood, that he's been there for almost a month waiting to go, that he can still call home. He can still call me, that I'll be there. And if something needs to be fixed, I'll fix it. And, I'm always on it. But I think he sees me completely differently now, that, yeah, she's my mom. And, if I fuck up, she's there, and, whatnot, but it's that she's always going to be there no matter what. And so it's made us stronger. And, I love that kid, and I know that he loves me, and, so it's our relationship is good.
That's good.
It is. So the dating, on the other hand, I don't know about that. I'm having a hard time with that one.
Well, that'll be your next
Oh my gosh.
holy climb. Yeah.
To be continued on that one.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to follow up again and see how that's going.
Right.
So
there you go.
It's quite a story you've got.
Yeah, that's just kind of the gist of it.
I'm sure.
I could write a book. I literally could.
Yeah.
But I'm thankful for my life, and for who is in my life, and for where I'm at. There's a lot to be thankful for, regardless of all of the negativity that's been in my life, all the horrible things that have happened. I'm truly thankful and blessed for where I'm at.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad for where you're at too.
Thank you.
I feel like I got to be a very, very small part of the story, but it was a privilege to be part of it, So
hey, it was always a fun time coming to your house, and it really was. I look forward to it every day. So
good. I'm glad. Well, listen, before we kind of wrap up, I wanted to check in and see if there was any last kind of thoughts or ideas or things you wanted to make sure we hit on, or that you made sure you said.
Just to anyone who may be watching or listening, no matter how hard things may get, don't give up. Don't give up. Just keep pushing through. And it's easier said than done. And at that very moment, you may not see that to be true, but just keep pushing. And I promise it will get better, and you will see that light at the end of the tunnel, so they say, and things will start looking up for you.
Yeah.
And I'll leave it at that.
That's great. There's a famous story that I'm not even going to try because I'll mangle it, but about a guy walking through the woods with, I don't know, an elder or something, or a spirit guide or whatever, and it's dark and he can't see the path, right? And he doesn't know where the path is leading. And so he tells the spirit guide, I don't know, I have to quit. I have to stop. I can't, it's too dark and I can't see, and I don't know where the path is taking me. The spirit guide says, well, can you see the next step? And he says, well, yeah, I can see the next step. The spirit guide says, well, take that one.
Right.
So,
right. And then you'll see the step after that.
That's right.
Just keep going and don't stop.
So thank you so much for investing some time and coming on and telling your story. What I want to say so first of all, not just thank you, Rebecca, but also thank you to everyone who watches or listens to this podcast. I appreciate you more than you know. Your time is a valuable commodity, and I try to make sure that we're providing value in what we offer here. So you can watch the podcast on YouTube. The site on YouTube is Growth and Thriving LLC. Or you can search Growth and Thriving Podcast on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or on Google Podcasts. That will be the audio version only. Please, by all means, leave a comment, and if you like the content, please subscribe. Let us know. You can find us on Facebook. We have 3 Facebook community groups. One is called Growth and Thriving After Trauma. One is called Thriving Fathers, Parenting After Trauma. And the third is Leadership Skills for Survivors. Rebecca is connected through at least Growth and Thriving After Trauma, right? You're in that group.
Yeah.
So if you have questions or comments or would like to reach out to Rebecca in some way, she's, not a helper or somebody out there. So if you message me through those groups on Facebook or through YouTube or whatever, I will pass messages along to her, and have no doubt that she will get back to you. So again, thank you everyone so much for your time. Thank you, Rebecca. And for the moment, we'll sign off. It's Dr. Jerry Sunshine Novak saying, keep growing until you're thriving.